Hey everyone, welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for today's explainer. We're going to be looking at a piece of history that is honestly nothing short of awe-inspiring. We're traveling back to the dawn of the 20th century to explore this monumental feat of engineering, politics, and faith. We're talking about the story of the Hejaz Railway. It was this incredibly ambitious mega-project designed to carve a path of iron literally straight through the unforgiving Arabian desert, connecting Damascus all the way down to Medina. We're going to stick strictly to the raw historical facts, looking at the harsh landscapes, the rusting infrastructure, and the data just to really understand how this colossal project came to be, the monumental impact it had, and ultimately, its sudden, tragic destruction.
Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine facing a seemingly insurmountable logistical nightmare. How do you engineer a solution that shrinks a grueling 60-day ordeal across completely unforgiving terrain into a relatively comfortable 4-day trip? To truly appreciate the sheer scale of the engineering solution here, we first need to understand the brutal reality of the problem itself. So starting with part 1, the arduous Hajj journey.
Picture this. For centuries, long before the first steel tracks were ever laid down, the journey from Damascus to Medina for the Hajj pilgrimage was a perilous test of sheer survival. Pilgrims formed these massive camel caravans for a trek that dragged on for 2 whole months. And remember, the Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar. This is absolutely crucial because it means the dates of the Hajj shift every single year. So you couldn't just plan for a mild spring journey. Eventually, the cycle would force travel through the dead of winter, enduring freezing temperatures and torrential downpours. Fast forward a few years, and that exact same journey had to be made at the absolute height of summer, crossing scorching, desolate deserts. And the weather wasn't even the only threat. Towns and settlements were incredibly sparse, meaning your supplies were dangerously limited, and the route was constantly under the looming threat of raids by hostile tribes. It was no joke.
And if the physical toll wasn't enough, there was the massive financial barrier. The cost of undertaking this grueling journey was around £40. Now, to put that into perspective, in the context of the early 1900s, £40 was an exorbitant, staggering amount of money. It was a massive wall that effectively locked countless Muslims out from fulfilling one of the core pillars of their faith. Only the very wealthy, or those who saved up for their entire lifetimes, could even dream of making the trip. Something definitely had to change. That brings us to Section 2, Sultan's ambitious railway vision. Enter Sultan Abdul-Hamid II. Looking objectively at the historical records of the time, the Sultan was dealing with some growing disunity across the provinces of the Ottoman Khalifa. He looked at this massive logistical nightmare we just talked about, along with the geopolitical state of his empire, and proposed a solution that was breathtaking in its scale. He basically had 2 main goals here. On one hand, establishing a railway specifically for the pilgrims was meant to awaken and solidify feelings of Islamic unity among the global Muslim community, the Ummah. On the other hand, from a purely geopolitical standpoint, driving a modern rail line through the heart of the Arab provinces was a strategic move to physically and administratively strengthen the Khalifa's authority in a region that was really beginning to fracture. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the timeline. The sheer velocity of this project is staggering. It maps out an incredibly rapid rise and a sudden, tragic fall. The ground was broken in 1900. Despite the immense, crazy challenges of laying track through remote, waterless deserts, the railroad officially opened just 8 years later in 1908. You can see the immediate boom in ridership by 1912 and 1914, but look down at the end of the timeline there, 1924. In less than 3 decades, the project goes from an ambitious dream to a world-changing reality to total collapse. Moving right along to Section 3, the Hejaz Railway Revolution. When those tracks finally reached Medina in September 1908, it was a complete revolution. Seriously, look at this stark before and after contrast. It's almost hard to comprehend the shift. On the left, we have the old reality. 2 entire months of agonizing travel on the back of a camel, battling freezing rain or blistering heat, risking your life and paying £40 for the privilege. On the right, the new reality. Boarding a modern train, sitting in comfort, protected from the elements, and arriving at your destination in just 4 days. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just an upgrade. It was a total paradigm shift. So, the crucial point is this new cost, £3.50. That insane financial barrier we talked about earlier, completely shattered. Practically overnight, a journey reserved for the privileged few became totally accessible to the masses. This dramatic price drop literally democratized the pilgrimage. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what happens when you remove massive barriers to entry. In 1912, the railway transported a very respectable 30,000 pilgrims. But, word spreads fast. As people realized the journey was now quick, safe, and most importantly, cheap, the numbers absolutely exploded. Just 2 years later, in 1914, ridership skyrocketed to 300,000 pilgrims, a tenfold growth in 2 years. The railway was doing exactly what it set out to do, bringing massive numbers of people together.
But of course, that leads us into Section 4, sabotage and final ruin.
History is rarely a straight line of unbroken progress, right? The incredible success of the Hejaz Railway was destined to be short-lived. We have to shift our focus now to the geopolitical earthquakes that led to its tragic downfall. The railway, which had been designed as this artery of unity, suddenly became a prime military target. During the Arab Revolt, which was led by T.E. Lawrence, famously known as Lawrence of Arabia, and Sharif Hussein of Makkah, the Hejaz end of the railway was deliberately and systematically sabotaged. Tracks were blown up, bridges were completely destroyed, and locomotives were derailed. The vital link connecting Medina to Damascus was violently severed. The steel thread that was holding the region together was cut.
And the physical destruction of the tracks was quickly followed by a total political restructuring of the whole region. By 1924, the Khalifa was destroyed. The Arab lands were carved up into separate nation-states under the Sykes-Picot Agreement. With the region now divided by these new, artificial borders and administered by foreign powers, the very concept of a unified transnational railway just became politically impossible. The sweeping historical events of the era permanently erased the possibility of this specific unity project ever emerging again.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Legacy of the Railway. Let's move to and see how this builds into the landscape today. Over a century has passed since the first trains rolled down those tracks. Today, if you travel through the Hejaz region, you're not going to see bustling trains. Instead, you see these incredibly solemn, silent ruins resting in the sand. Abandoned stone stations, rusting locomotives, and twisted rails half buried in the desert are all that physically remain. They stand there as haunting, silent monuments to a bygone era, perfectly preserved by the dry desert air, just hinting at the massive scale of what once was. I want to leave you with this really powerful final thought taken straight from our source text. Although the Hejaz Railroad is now discarded to the pages of history, it shows just what can be achieved when Muslims are united. It forces us to ask a pretty compelling question, doesn't it? I mean, if a monumental feat of engineering like this could be achieved over a century ago under immense pressure, what incredible megaprojects and advancements could be realized in the modern world if fractured societies chose to unite behind a shared, peaceful vision? It's something truly profound to think about. Thank you all so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history around you.